Good morning and welcome. I'm John Kelker, president of the Springfield Citizens Club. It certainly is a pleasure to have you. Before we get started, I have two special announcements I'd like to share. The first is to acknowledge the loss of Lee Milner. Lee was a Citizens Club board member and a wonderful gentleman. If you didn't know Lee, you certainly saw him at our meetings and community meetings across our community. Lee will be missed, and the Citizens Club passes along our condolences to Lee's family and his friends. The second is to announce an evening Citizens Club meeting on Thursday, May 2nd. A conversation with Governor J.B. Pritzker on all things important to Springfield. Special thanks to Joyce Narduli for making this event possible, and Bernie Schoenberg, who will moderate the program. This is a free event, 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock here at the Hoagland in the LRS Theater. Doors will open at 5:30. To some degree, we've been limited in what we could share to promote this event, so if you have the ability to share with your friends and invite people to join us on that Thursday evening, May 2nd, I hope you will do so. Now, back to today's program. As we get started, it's my pleasure to thank our Citizens Club sponsors and partners, WMAY Radio, NPR Illinois, the City of Springfield's Audiovisual Department from the Office of the Mayor, and this morning's coffee sponsor, Cindy Lamar. The Citizens Club mission is to advance the public's understanding on topics that concern the Springfield community. We are a nonpartisan volunteer organization supported by annual dues. Remarks, opinions, and anything shared by our representatives are their own. The Citizens Club is not responsible for these comments, and anything shared by our presenters today is not an official club position. Today, we will look at artificial intelligence. What is AI? Its potential, any concerns, and how it is impacting business, education, and healthcare in our community, our country, and around the world. Moderating today's program is Rob Kerr. Rob serves as the Executive Director of Innovation and Opportunity at the University of Illinois Springfield, where he leads the development of the university's Downtown Innovation Center. His background includes serving as Deputy Director for Entrepreneurship, Innovation and Technology at the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, and Director of the Career and Technical Education at the Illinois Community College Board. With that, I will introduce Rob. He and two presenters have a PowerPoint they will work through together, and I will let Rob take over.
Thanks, John. Good morning, everybody. Very excited to be here to talk about artificial intelligence, and I have brought two experts from the University of Illinois campus that can contextualize and help you understand both where AI is today, and we're also excited to talk about where we think it's going to be going in the future. So I have the pleasure of introducing Neetu Singh, Associate Professor of Management Information Systems at UIS. Dr. Singh specializes in business analytics, data mining, and database management with a focus on healthcare informatics and business analytics. Her research emphasizes digital innovations to improve patient outcomes, opioid abuse interventions, and continuity of care. She is an advisor for the Graduate Certificate in Business Analytics at UIS and was the recipient of the 2022 College of Business Management's Scholar of the Year Award. So, Dr. Singh. And then to her right, Josh Smith is a computer science faculty member and accomplished software engineer. Josh is the director of the UIS Orion Lab, a hands-on tech learning space where students explore their ideas and bring them to life through physical objects. The lab focuses on robotics, 3D printing, and of course, artificial intelligence. Josh, in partnership with the UIS Innovation Center and the Capital Area Career Center, is teaching a program this fall for regional high school students that we're very excited about. These students will learn rapid prototyping and design skills in our new downtown 3D printing lab called TechX. More information will be coming on that very soon. So we're excited to work very closely with both Neetu and Josh at the Innovation Center in the coming months and years. The University of Illinois Springfield has been taking AI very seriously for a very long time. In fact, we've convened a campus-wide committee to discuss AI issues, AI implementation, both at how it should be handled at UIS, in higher education, and broadly throughout the community. So the folks on the panel here, as well as many others on campus, are focusing quite a bit of their research time and energy on artificial intelligence. So really what we hope to accomplish here this morning is to level set a bit, talk about what is a definition of artificial intelligence that we can all kind of agree to. Talk about the benefits of AI today and the promise of AI to come. We're going to talk about challenges and risks because, of course, with any new disruptive technology, there are issues that we need to be concerned about. We want to talk about how AI is impacting all of us, and then, of course, we definitely want to leave a lot of time for questions and answers at the end. I have a feeling there's going to be a good, robust conversations. I've been to a number of Citizens Club events, and that's always been the part that impresses me the most, is the level of conversation afterwards. So, before we kind of jump in, I'd like to do a little quick audience poll, if you could. Raise your hand if you have used AI in the last 24 hours. 1, 3. Maybe 20% of the room, about or so. Okay, we're going to come back to this later, but so about 20% of the room or so has thought that they've used AI in the last 24 hours. So that's interesting. All right, so let's jump right in. As I said, the first thing we really want to do is get everyone on the same page and talk about what is AI, because it's a term we're hearing a lot of through the media, but I think kind of coming up with our operational definition is incredibly important. So Dr. Singh, I'm going to turn to you. Could you help us define AI?
Thank you, Rob. And I'm so glad to be here. And let's see, actually yesterday I was working on, this conversation and to see how we can define AI. And my 10-year-old was asking me, Mom, how you define AI? Then I said, let's sit together and find out. Then we went on Google, which is a regular search engine, and I just used the terminology, define artificial intelligence. And it gave me, I hope you all can see the slides, and it gave me, if you see when we look into any of when we try to find anything on internet, Google gave me top 10 records, and I just thought to put it over here. And I'm sorry if it's not visible, but if we can highlight, it says all the definitions, whether it's from a software company, whether it's from a hardware company, whether it's from a industry, or whether it is from the US Department of State. Everyone is saying that artificial intelligence is a computer system which tries to mimic human brain. So basically, it tries to translate human intelligence into the computer intelligence. Then we thought, okay, we are talking about AI. How about we just ask one AI, which is nowadays called large language models, which is generative AI. Let's ask one of them, what is artificial intelligence? So I use the same terms that I used for Google, and I said, define artificial intelligence. And if you see, instead of giving me a list of resources, it just gave me the whole description. So that is the difference between a regular search engine and the large language models. Large language model, instead of giving us the resources, it tries to summarize and give us the definition. But if we see, again, it's saying the same thing, that I'm a computer system which is trained by a human. I try to mimic the human brain. So that is one of the large language model, and most of the people use nowadays, that is called ChatGPT. Then I thought, okay, that's just one. To avoid any biases, I said, let's try one more. And that is the Copilot, which nowadays I think most of us use on our smartphone as well. But it is a more specific large language model, that is the generative AI model, and it gave us the same result. It's saying, I am a computer system which is trained, I learned, I acquired the knowledge, and I got this whole training to become and mimic human brain. So overall, if we can see, artificial intelligence is a computer system which learns from human intelligence, and it helps us to do better.
So there was a lot of terms in there that you've used, and I'd like to kind of help.
Sure.
Let's define what within there. So a large language model. Josh, do you want to? You're kind of the computer science person. You've built AI systems for the university and for others. What is a large language model? An LLM, as the acronym is.
So essentially, a large language model is a way of letting the computer kind of predict the text that you're wanting to see next. And what it's going to do is it ranks essentially the word choice, and it says, I think that you have about an 80% chance that this is the word that you want to see next. And then based on that word, it ranks the next words, and it keeps going, and it's generating the next word, one word at a time, based on what it has previously said, in determining how closely that's going to fulfill your needs. And so it's just trying to predict. It's the predictive text on your phone, but on steroids. And it's using a lot of statistics behind the scenes and a whole lot of math and a lot of really, really boring things that take a long time to train it on. But that's all it's doing, is it's trying to make you happy, because that's what its goal is. So it's saying, this is what you're looking for, and you've asked me this question, and I think based on probability, this is what you want to see.
So it's trying to make me happy.
Yes, that is its main goal.
That. Okay. So how is it making these decisions though? Like I know you said it's a lot of math back there, but how does this system choose that next word?
So it's based on training.
Okay, so what does that mean, training?
So as a software engineer, if I were to develop a system, I would ask it a question and it would give me a response, and I would rank that response and say, I'm extremely happy with this, and essentially give the computer a reward. And if the response was way off the mark, I would say, no, this is not right. I give you 0 points, and you need to try again. And the computer system, over time, after thousands and actually now millions and billions of attempts, it trains itself to make you happy. Because at the end of the day, these large language models want you to use them, because they're provided by companies that have developers and they have people working behind the scenes that need a paycheck. So they want you to keep coming back, so they want you to be happy with their searches. So they're training these models so that hopefully they're giving you as most of the correct answer as they possibly can.
So what are they using to train these models? Like, what is the source material?
Data. So it's Google searches, it's all of the data that they can possibly gather on whether you generated the response, and that, like ChatGPT has a little thumbs up button at the bottom, you can say, I like this response. That goes into its training. So if you prompt it and you ask it what AI is, and it gives you a good answer, the idea is that you'll give it a thumbs up, so that the next time someone asks what AI is, it will likely generate something along the same lines.
Okay, so that kind of leads me to the next piece of this. So if the three of us are all asking ChatGPT-4, what is AI? Are we all, if we were all, let me back up, if we were all going to ask Google, if we typed into Google, what is AI? We would probably get very similar results, correct? Like we'd get the list of,
yes, absolutely.
And maybe some AI-generated questions next. What would happen if we put that into ChatGPT, that question? Would we all get the same results?
Close. The idea, the sentiment would be the same, but the wording would be slightly different based on what it thought you wanted at the time.
Interesting.
And if I could add to that, and that's a very good question, because that is the most important part in artificial intelligence, or in simple Google search, the way we ask the question. For example, if I said define artificial intelligence, it will present it in a different way. And if Rob says, what is artificial intelligence, it will give in a different context. And if Josh says that, okay, can you tell me what is artificial intelligence? Then first it will pass, can you tell me? And then it will go to the artificial intelligence. So I think the way we ask the question, that makes a difference. And it's same like if we see here the slide which is here on, the top part shows how human interprets it, and the bottom part shows how these artificial intelligence models interpret it. So it's just like the neurons in human brain, we have those neurons in the model too. If we ask a 5-year-old, can you recognize whether it's a cat or a dog? Then because that 5-year have been trained for 1 year starting from pre-K, then 5-year-old can tell that. It's the same way. The model need to be trained over time on the data, which is called the knowledge corpus of this model. So that's how it gives answer.
So I think we've established that these systems exist. I think sometimes they're referred to as a black box, though, right? We don't, even scientists like the two of you may not understand, like a model that you've trained, how exactly it pushes that information out to the other side, right? So you kind of, it's kind of like our children, right? We do our best, we train them, we send them out into the world, but we're not exactly sure why they're making these decisions that they're making.
Absolutely, and there's sometimes you look at them and you're like, where did that come from? And AI is the same way, and that's why we have to keep training it and keep working with it. They're just like children. You know, if you recognize that your child has done something they shouldn't do, you need to reprimand them in some way and encourage them to make the right decision. And we're doing the same exact thing with AI. There's been a history of how this has worked out poorly. Google was very famous about 15 years ago. They used artificial intelligence to recognize people in pictures. And it was a very famous issue where they were misidentifying a certain group of people. And it was extremely offensive. And their AI model had not been trained properly because of who trained it. And we learned very early on that the biases that we have as humans can very easily be translated into our AI programs. So this is definitely one thing that we need to be careful of when training. And the same thing with a child. If I have biases and I'm raising a child, there's a good chance that my biases are going to be passed on to my children. And we have to be extremely careful of this.
So my takeaway is ChatGPT is my child.
Yeah, essentially.
So, I think, so we've talked a little bit about how the scientists and technologists create these AI models. And I kind of want to pivot to how we use them. So, Neetu, you mentioned, how we ask the question matters. And I think often, that kind of side of AI is often referred to as prompt engineering, right? So this is the idea of how you ask, how you pose these questions matters. Now, I reject the term prompt engineering. I prefer prompt psychology, because UIS doesn't have an engineering school, and but we do have a very strong background in liberal arts and humanities. And I really do feel like the prompting side is something that an institution like UIS can really be a leader in, because what you're really trying to do is structure a question in a way that is focused, that eliminates the opportunities for responses that are outside of your parameters that you want, and kind of thinking about using AI as actually a process of asking questions rather than kind of what we do with Google searches, which I don't know about the rest of you, but like, I give Google very little information, like, Cubs game. Like, I just want to know what time the Cubs are playing, right? And it'll usually 9 times out of 10 spit out Cubs will play at 1:20 today or something like that. Apologies to probably the majority of Cardinals fans in the room. But if you were to do that with a ChatGPT or another large language model, who knows what you would get. And we'd all get, with that limited information, ChatGPT is going to be like, well, I don't know exactly what you're asking for, so I'm going to make my best guess here and give you a paragraph about the history probably of the Chicago Cubs or something like that. So how does prompt engineering engage kind of the brains of of a large language model? I have a tendency to call it ChatGPT because that's the way I most of the time interact with AI. But how does that kind of structuring, and either one of you could take this, matter? And how do we be concerned about that? And do you have any advice for the audience on prompt psychology or how they should be engaging with large language models and AI?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question, and again, I try to relate it with my kids. I have two kids. One is a fourth grader and one is a freshman in high school. So I remember when they were growing up, and now they tell us, Mom, what are the magic words? Please and thank you. So it's the same way here with the model, that we have to train and we have to be very careful how we are asking the question. And then it will go and try all permutation and combination, like what are the different ways they can be combined and they can be interpreted, and that's how it will give us the answer. But again, just like humans have bias, similarly the model will have bias too, to interpret that which one is a better combination, what we need to give the output. So that is what is all called the black box, that not even an engineer who developed that model, they know that what is going inside. Because if we see at the bottom part, it's complex, very complex. It's trying all different permutations and combinations that can help it to answer the question. Josh, would you like to add?
No, I think you pretty much nailed it. And a big issue for me is, like, I remember being trained all through middle school and high school. I'd raise my hand in class and say, can I go to the bathroom? And my teacher would rudely answer, I don't know, can you? So I was being trained to ask the right question at a very young age. And understanding how to ask questions into a large language model like ChatGPT really enhances the output. So we called it, whenever I was a software engineer, we called it your Google foo. And that was being able to ask Google the right question to get you the right response quicker. And it was a technique that you had to learn over time, where you would ask it a very specific question and you would then figure out what keywords it is looking for to give you the best response possible. And we're going through the same process now, but in a completely different approach. And I keep likening this to my children. And I can go up to my daughter, who is 4 years old, and ask her, what is an elephant? And she'll give me a pretty good answer. But if I ask ChatGPT the same thing, it's going to give me actually a pretty similar answer. But if I just type in the word elephant, or I just walk by my daughter and say elephant, she may make a sound at me. She may blow a trumpet's horn, or anything else. I have no idea what she's going to do because she's a 4-year-old, and I have no idea what ChatGPT would do if I just said the word elephant. So understanding how to ask these questions is going to change the response that we get and the type of information that we get.
And I think I think the Google versus like large language model interaction is important to consider. Like for me, I guess my Google foo was realizing, like, you start with the most important word in what you're trying to search and you work kind of back, you know, to get, because if you flip that, then it's going to give you a different result. In other words, I'm looking for elephants in Africa, you know, that are, you know, gray or something like that. And if you put that into Google, you're going to probably get links and pictures and things. If you flipped that, I don't know what you would get. Gray, Africa, you'll probably get the same thing. Google's pretty smart now. But with ChatGPT, which I use quite a bit, I found that, at least for me, I try a more conversational tone. Like I ask it questions in sentence format. I'm an old man, so I still put a period and then 2 spaces, you know, and when I'm asking, so I essentially feel like I'm talking to ChatGPT. I also say thank you, and that was great, and I praise ChatGPT probably more.
That was going to be my next question. If you say please and thank you.
I do, yes. But maybe that's just a trick for me, because I feel like, because when you're engaging with ChatGPT, or at least when I am, it's a back and forth. Whereas with Google, it's like, give me this piece of information, I'm going to click the link, and now I'm in the internet, and I'm out, Google's gone, and now I'm on to a URL and whatever, and my research continues. But with ChatGPT, it could be this back and forth, where ChatGPT will give me a response, and I'll say, oh, that was great, thank you. But could you be more specific? Could you clarify this or that? So it becomes more conversational. It becomes kind of this little, like a little assistant that sits next to you on your desk and can help. And we're going to kind of get in next to kind of how AI is impacting us on a daily life, and maybe this is a good segue, but you know, is AI my assistant?
Yes, we can say that, because if you see, and you have nicely explained that, Rob, that the conversational part. So I think that is the difference between the regular Google search engine, which is an AI, which help us to predict something. On the other hand, the large language models like ChatGPT or Copilot that help us to have that conversational argument. It helps us in learning, and I think we will get into just in a bit. For example, if I want to know, I'm not good at drawing, I want to know how to draw an elephant. In Google, I will say, tell me step by step how to draw an elephant. It will give me the step, and I might not understand it. But if I go on the large language model and say, can you please help me drawing an elephant, it might give me a better way to do it. And if I think I'm not good at it, I can say, can you help me with this part? So that can help me. So that becomes a personal assistant, a co-teacher, which can help in learning in our own pace.
I'd like to bring up the point that whenever you mentioned talking about ChatGPT, you actually said please, but when you mentioned Google, you didn't. Stop saying please.
All right, so let's talk about how AI is in our lives right now. True or false? AI was created with ChatGPT 3, 12, 18 months ago. Am I right? Because that's when I started to really interact with it. So
absolutely not. So ChatGPT has been around, or a large language model. The idea of AI has been around for decades. We have research papers going back to the 1950s about artificial intelligence, and it really started to take off in about the 1980s. Is really when things started ramping up, when computational power started becoming a little bit more relevant, and now with the huge data boom that we have and the ability to get all of these data points, and that now we're able to actually analyze these data points, we're able to make better predictions and help out these large language models and AIs to generate the things that we're looking for.
So what's industry sectors need to? You're in kind of that in-between world between the science that Josh is in, and working with students in the business school and some of these other areas, the more applied side of AI. So could you talk just a little bit about how AI is impacting industry or businesses, or and how is that working? Who's leading this charge?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And as Josh mentioned, it's nothing new. It's there for a long time. It's because of the internet and the availability of data and the advancement in technology that almost all of us are carrying it in our hand. A very good example is in 1996, IBM have developed a Deep Blue, which is a chess game, and that was a computerized game. So if we see, it goes that long back, and then over time it has evolved. Now, if we see currently, AI is impacting not one industry or one domain, it's everywhere. If we see, it's in business, it's in marketing, it's in agriculture, it's in advertising. All the organizations are being impacted equally with the advancement in AI, more especially with this new generative AI, large language models, ChatGPT, Copilot. And I think it's something that we all need to understand how we can use it. For example, if we take healthcare. In healthcare, there was a time where the healthcare professions have to spend a lot of time talking to the patient, understanding what is happening, and also taking notes. But now with those personal assistants, the transcribers, they can record what patient is telling, they can interpret it later on, but they can spend more time with the patient with that limited time. So I think that is how it is with the healthcare, and it has advanced more that a doctor can look at the data of the similar type of patients and help in predicting that what the diagnosis and the prognosis of a specific disease.
Wow, that's fascinating. So. What's going to be kind of next? Like, is healthcare? So in Springfield, healthcare is obviously one of the largest employers. It's one of the most important sectors that we have. What should we be expecting in AI and healthcare as we move forward? It seems to be moving so rapidly, this change, right? Is that pace going to continue in sectors like healthcare? And if so, what, peek around the corner for us as a researcher and tell us, what should we be expecting from AI, especially in something like healthcare, which is in your research focus in the next 5 years or beyond?
Sure. And if we see even in healthcare, it's not new. It's been there. For example, IBM, which is a leader in AI, has its IBM Watson is one of the AIs which has been used in healthcare domain. And it has been used as an assistant to do some help the physicians and the nurses. And there was a survey done with the nurses in New York Hospital where nurses mentioned that the AI, the IBM Watson, helped them to have less nurses burn out because we know how much work they have to do. And I think over the time, IBM Watson have been improved, and it will keep helping the healthcare professionals in minimizing their burnout and spending more time. Additionally, it's also being, as it's being trained, we have to be everything has a pros and a con. We have to be very careful, and healthcare professionals are being very cognizant and careful about the data privacy, the personal information of the patient that is going. So I think that's where is trying to have a balance between the advantages of it as well as being very careful about the personal information, how much they want to disseminate.
So, while you're both researchers in this area of AI, you're also faculty members, right? And is AI the death of education? In other words, am I going to tell a student to write a 10-page paper on Huckleberry Finn, and they're going to say, okay, and then come back in 30 seconds and say, I'm done?
They certainly can. But no, it's not the death of education at all. And AI in education is just a tool, and how it's used determines the outcome. Right now, we've got a lot of different approaches that we're taking with AI in education. One of them is this adaptive learning style. So there's websites out there that you can go to. Alex is a great one, ALEKS, for learning mathematics. You can go there and you take a quick little quiz, and it analyzes your exact knowledge so that it can target an educational plan to you as a specific person. So you're getting that one-on-one knowledge that you would normally get with a teacher, but you don't need that teacher now, and it is personal to you. So it'll actually adapt and learn with you over time. So if you keep struggling with the same topic over and over, it'll give you more of those things and try and get down to the root of why you're struggling with it. So it's definitely not the death of education in any way, and especially with things like the large language model being able to generate text and things like that. As a faculty member, I can very clearly tell when ChatGPT has written a student's paper. It uses terminology that's close because it's trying to make me happy. So it's trying to guess these words. And as a faculty member, you can very quickly read through it and tell that it knows what it's talking about to a degree, but it hasn't actually interpreted the text for true meaning. It's looking at everything at a textual level. It's not looking at the depth behind the words that are on the page. It's only looking at the words on the page as they are, because it can't interpret the meaning behind it, the feelings behind it, the emotion behind it, and the context behind it. So that is our job as faculty, is to encourage the student to bring out those things that AI can't do, and asking them and prompting the student to give us a response that an AI model can't do. So it's my job as a faculty member to change my approach to teaching and to encourage students to learn in a slightly different way, because they can go learn what the general history of Huckleberry Finn was about very easily. And you can do that. We've been able to do that for years. There's always been Spark Notes where you can, I read Moby Dick in college, and it took me 45 minutes because I read Spark Notes. And so this has been around for a long time, the idea of being able to take these shortcuts. Now, I didn't understand the depth of Moby Dick. I wasn't able to write my 5-page paper that I was supposed to write.
It's a metaphor, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. So, we've had had these issues for a very long time, and it's nothing new in education. And now we're actually starting to see a reversion back to the way we used to teach in the 40s and 50s, where we're actually getting that hands-on approach with the student because they're able to get the general knowledge from AI, and now I can focus on the depth and the breadth that I want to focus on the understanding and the underlying meaning of things.
Yeah, I liken it to, recently technology has allowed us to kind of do these flipped approaches to learning, right? Where it used to be the sage on the stage, right? Where you guys were the experts, you were going to sit up there and you were going to tell these great people everything they needed to know, and then they were going to leave and go off. And technology and the ability to merge online and face-to-face learning has allowed us to say, okay, this is what I want you to do before you come to class, and then class becomes an interactive experience where we're discussing your questions and feeding and learning off of each other. So I certainly think that's exciting. But I do also want to push back a little bit. So you kind of mentioned hallucinations, right, is what we sometimes called it, especially maybe early on in ChatGPT, like 3 months ago. I think ChatGPT's gotten a little better, but hallucinations was when ChatGPT would just create things out of whole cloth because it was trying to please you, yes. Right? So it was, somebody likened it to, an overly eager administrative assistant who will lie to you whenever necessary, And so because it would say, oh, you asked me this question, and I don't really know how to answer it. But rather than saying like, oh, I can't answer that, which ChatGPT would never do, it will just make something up. And those were these hallucinations. And I think, especially early on, there were some very interesting stories about people that got in trouble by saying that this was their work that was hallucinations from ChatGPT. There's a famous lawyer that used it in court, and there was obviously that it was not their own. So all of that aside, I'd also like to ask you to kind of think ahead into the future and peek around the corner for us. Is ChatGPT going to overcome that barrier? Will large language models get better at understanding context? And all of those things that you're using now to say, oh, I get that, that's not the student's work. But in 5 years, can we still be that certain?
That's their goal, is to be able to fake us because they're trying to make us happy. And the reason like ChatGPT got released is because they needed more training data. They needed more people to tell their system whether it's doing the right thing or not, and detecting those hallucinations and downvoting essentially the ChatGPT's response is its way of getting feedback. So we're actively training it. So every day ChatGPT is getting closer to what they want it to be. And it's going to continuously make it harder for a faculty member like me to detect plagiarism and detect an AI-generated paper, especially when you can ask it, you can say, those words you used are entirely too big. Can you dumb this down for me? And it will. It'll give you the same understanding, but with much simpler words. But some of the things that I like to do is include like word limitations. Like in 30 words or less, can you explain this to me? ChatGPT ignores the in 30 words or less part, and it will give you an entire paragraph. And then that's how I'm using it to encourage my students to, even if they are using AI to generate the response, they need to interpret the response and reword it and ensure that their 30 words are the correct words. But we're also using it for things like assistive technology. So being able to reach a much wider audience with our education. So being able to tell it, hey, can you transcribe my lecture? Which normally would take me days to do. I can have an AI assistant do that for me in minutes, and sometimes, if you pay enough, real time. So as I'm giving a lecture, there would be closed captions on the bottom of the screen that is saying exactly what I'm saying, and that's through that large language model and generative AI, and it's making our lives a lot easier, and it's helping us reach a lot more people.
Yeah, and I think that's the next big tool. Neetu, you wanted to add?
Sure, and I think I would like to add related to education, and even in 5 or 20 years, I think the lag that artificial intelligence or these large language models is contextualization, providing the critical thinking and the creative thinking. Because if a student is taking these online courses, ChatGPT is helping, but sometimes you see when you're in a classroom, you can see from the expression that I'm saying something, but someone is having trouble in understanding. They might not say it. So I think that critical thinking and problem-solving skills that can happen in face-to-face discussions or even in video discussions, that would be very difficult to replicate in these AI models or AI assistant. So to have those creative and critical thinking, we still need teachers or professors like us.
Okay, good. All right. I mean, they did say, I can remember in 5th grade when they gave me my first handheld calculator, my dad said, "Oh, I can't believe they're going to give you a calculator. Now, why bother teaching you math? You've got a calculator in your hand. You can do it all, right?" But of course, you still need to understand the context of the problem. You need to understand how to interact with the calculator, the prompt engineering of a calculator, because if you put your division in the wrong order, you're not going to get the answer that you want, and you may not know it, and you can tell the teacher, "Yes, I do know the answer to this question," and it's completely wrong, even though the calculator has told you that it's right, because you kind of messed up the input. So there's been so many of these things, I believe, in education that was the death knell of it. Wikipedia was going to be the death of education, right? Because students could look up anything they wanted. So, and somehow we persevered as educators. Let's pivot a little bit, and Neetu, you helped organize a great conversation on UIS's campus around AI bias. So that's another term that people have probably heard. What are some? I don't want to call it the dark side, but what are some of the issues that we as citizens, as engaged people in the community, should be concerned about when we're talking about AI, so we can help to make sure that these systems are improved as we move forward through this AI revolution?
Thank you, Rob. I think that's a very important and critical question about the bias in AI. And to start with, I would say just like a human who is developing the system, humans have their own biases related to different contexts. Similarly, an AI model will have those biases. So the bias in AI are divided into 3 parts. One is the training bias, other is the algorithmic bias, and third is the cognitive bias. So training means the data that the model is getting to be trained and give us the outcome. If that data is not a good representation of the whole population, if it has been done a selective sampling, let's just take that simple example of a kid asking whether it's a cat or a dog. Same thing with the AI. If in my data I have all the information related to the dogs, then there is no way that AI model can help in interpreting whether it's a cat or a dog. So I think that training data bias is one of the critical aspects, and having the good data, having a good representation of the population can help in improving that bias. Second one, that algorithm, that how those permutation combinations are being done. So if a person who is developing the algorithm makes some assumptions, any model is not 100% accurate. We make some assumptions when we are developing a model, whether it's a mathematical model, whether it's a psychological model, or whether it's an engineering model. So I think the assumptions that are made to develop the model, that plays a critical role. Otherwise, we can get a biased result. And the cognitive bias is that intelligence that we are putting into. If an AI model is developed to predict something in healthcare, and we are putting a data which is from a business domain, then that's where the cognitive bias will come. So I think we have to be very careful that what we are providing the model, how the model is processing all that information, and what specific thing we are trying to look for.
Okay, but I'm not training a model. So how should what is my role as a user? Or maybe let me rephrase that. How should I try to ensure that when I am using ChatGPT, that the results that I am getting or that I am using are not biased? How can the user be involved in this equation?
And yeah, so again, that's a great question. So for example, if you asked a question and you got an answer, you're not satisfied with it, as Josh mentioned, don't say thumbs up, say thumbs down. I don't like it. You have to give me something more specific. So I think as a user too, we have to be very careful what we are asking, what we are getting, and are we giving a good feedback to the model? Because then model will save that part and divide the data. What a user is liking, what is helping user to grow and understand, and what is not helping. So that will be filtered out.
So let's keep going. So what are some of the implications of a biased LLM in the real world? So we've talked a little bit about Google's early on their image recognition and all, and that was horrible, and that was earlier stages. But today, if let's say a business's large language model it does have bias in it, how does that impact people?
A very good example of that is the recruiting system. So when the recruiting organization, whichever organization, if they're trying to use an AI model, and there has been a research that was found and that organization had stopped using AI because the resume that they got, the resume had some words like executed, captured, which the data says is mostly used by the male applicants. So that will filter out the female or other applicants. So I think they stopped using. So that is the application that they have to be very careful if you're using the model. It's not biased, and if you find it, you either stop using it or provide it a balanced data, which have more information.
So yeah, because that's fascinating. Because you think of like a large corporation is bringing in thousands of applications, let's say for a given position, and if they were to choose individuals to sort through this, it would take forever. It would be very inefficient and expensive. So I would imagine it's very appealing to think, oh, we're going to feed all of these applications in one end of this large language model, this AI tool, and it'll spit out the 20 candidates that we want to review individually and start to move through. And if you don't pay attention, over time to who it's spitting out, all of a sudden you realize, you look around the room and it's like, it's all white guys sitting at these tables now because AI has somehow inadvertently filtered out other people who could have been just as successful, brought a lot more to the company, but this model was tweaked in a way that it wasn't allowing those people to get through. It gets to that black box piece. We don't really know how it's making those decisions. You can't say, explain to me why you picked these 20, or maybe it could, I guess. But yeah, so that's really fascinating to think about it through the hiring process, because these data sets are so big, right? So AI is a great tool for helping industry cull through some of these large data sets. Could you both kind of talk a little bit about that? Because I know, Neetu, this goes right to some of your research, but in general, like, how is industry in general, not sector specific, thinking about AI when they're looking at these large data sets that they have? And what is the power of AI to help improve the industry's use of those data sets, and maybe some of the concerns? And I'd love to hear both of your responses. And I know we're running low on time. But.
Yeah, so just to quickly add that, and I think it's continuing our discussion. So if we see that, and that's where I'm glad, Rob, you mentioned that sometimes we fear that whether these AIs will replace human being. I think it might not, as Rob, we saw that if the AI or the machine is giving the biased result, we need that collaboration of the human workforce as well as the machine workforce so that the cross-validation can be done. And it will be in any organization. So the computer systems, the AI, that can help in taking care of those repetitive tasks. But to make that final decision, a human intervention would be needed. So that's where the collaboration part comes. And I would like...
Yeah, and I'd like to bring it back to the idea that we're having a conversation with this AI. So even if it does give you the responses and say it filters out the top 20 candidates, feel free to ask it. Say, why did you choose these? Or why didn't you choose this specific person? Can you give me a reason behind it so that you can start to hopefully drill down and hopefully detect any of these biases? And because it's a conversational tool, I would be doing the same thing with you. If I had you review all of those applicants, I would come to Rob and say, why did you pick these? And we would have a quick conversation about it. And if he said, well, I picked all of these because they're middle-aged white men, I would say, well, we're not going with your choices. Thumbs down, and maybe even fire you. And we may fire that large language model. I mean, it all depends on that conversation that we have. So the onus comes back on me as a user because I'm just using this tool. And the AI is just that. It's just a tool. And we need to make sure that that tool doesn't influence my decisions in a bad way. So understanding that this conversation is beneficial in both ways. I'm asking it to do something, it's giving me a response, it's then on me to verify that response and verify that any detectable bias is not there.
Right. So I think one of the big data sets that industry uses, I think of like Netflix in its recommendation process, right? So when I watch a movie, at the end it says, hey, you might also like this. Now, I hadn't really thought about that as far as like being an AI tool. It just seems to make sense, but how do they use how is AI driving those kind of recommendations that we all see?
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
So at the end of your show, it'll ask you, did you like the show? What did you like about it? So whenever they first started their recommender systems, they would ask you 5 or 6 questions. And then they realized that they don't need to do that. So now there's 3 options. You can thumbs down it, you can give it a thumbs up, or a double thumbs up. And what it's doing is it's determining what things you liked and what other users like that also liked. So if me and you liked 6 of the same shows, but you actually liked a 7th show, it's going to recommend me that same 7th show, because history says that if you liked all 6 of them, I'm going to like what you liked as well.
Fascinating. All right, I do want to make sure we have time for questions, but I do want to give you both kind of like any other final thoughts, that you think this group should know, or kind of framing for AI as they leave here and go out into the world with this newfound knowledge on AI.
I think I would just like to add, we all are contributing in the development, maintenance, and uses of these AI systems. So when we are entering any information into AI, we have to be very careful and cognizant that will be used by the AI model to make or recommend future decisions. So I think as a community, we all can help ourselves by putting important and relevant information, and not try to put lot of biased or irrelevant information on AI. Also be cognizant that any personal information, if we enter there, it profile us in that way. They will create a profile, and they will say, and they will typecast you in that specific format.
Interesting. Josh, any?
Yeah, absolutely. So my main takeaways are AI is not out to get us. It's not out to take over the world. It is a business sector that is there to help achieve a goal. And their goal is to make money. And we need to make sure that we are rewarding the systems that are doing the most good. So if it turns out that a typical system is showing racial biases, we need to, as a community, we need to steer away from that and show that that's not something we're willing to put up with, and that they need to spend the time to do proper trainings to eliminate biases and to provide us with the best information possible. So it's on us as a community to ensure that we provide the best data we can to these large language models and generative AIs.
Fascinating. The only thing I would add, I think, and I heard this or read this somewhere that I've taken with me is, especially right around now, you may not lose your job to AI, but somebody might lose their job to somebody who understands how to utilize AI better than you do. So it is a tool. Frame it like it was the internet 10 or 20 years ago. If you resist, if you say, I don't need that, do that at your own peril, because others are going to use that as a way of increasing their effectiveness and their efficiency in data collection and knowledge. So it's an important tool that I think we all need to get to know. And UIS will be hosting a series of workshops in the coming months and training. So I hope as we roll those out, you all will join us and kind of dig even deeper. We have so much on the list that we wanted to get to that we didn't. But John, I do want to make sure that we have time for questions, because I have a feeling there's probably some good questions. But before we do, I want to revisit the original poll. Now, based on what you've heard today, how many of you think you've used AI in the last 24 hours? All right, I think we've probably gone up, which is good. Wonderful, thank you. Okay.
Thank you. And we are going to open it to audio questions. Norm Sims has the microphone. If you would, please introduce yourself so we know what you're asking. And I'm going to start with the first one. When I do thumbs up and thumbs down, am I assisting the ecosystem of that chat, or is it tailoring it to me, what I want?
It's actually a little bit of both. So every time that you train it, you are training your personal version of AI, but that data also gets fed back to the overall model, so that your training data does influence everyone else, but to a smaller degree.
Gotcha. Thank you.
As John mentioned, please give your name. Is this working? And ask you to be succinct in asking your question. It gives us more time for questions. Cinda?
Cinda Klickner. I'd like to have you comment on how we protect ourselves, because there have been cases of people who post that they are somebody and use their voice and get them in trouble. So how do we as individuals keep that from happening?
So deep fakes.
So where the industry is actually working on ways to detect deep fakes, but there's a lag time. There's always a lag time whenever we talk about cutting edge technology and then civilization actually catching up. And we're in that lag time where if someone wants to do something nefarious, they actually have the advantage. So the big thing is verify. If you get a phone call from someone, which is a big thing now, that says, my car's broke down and I'm trapped, I need you to send me $200 on Venmo, and it sounds like your daughter or your loved one, say, okay, yes, that's great, trust but verify. Hang up the phone, wait a few minutes, call them back on their actual cell phone number and say, did you just call me? And you'll get that verification before you can do anything. So it's on us to, if something seems off, trust your gut. Because if someone calls you randomly and says, hey, my car broke down, I'm in Tennessee, and you're like, okay, that could be, maybe. So just hang up, make another phone call, or call someone that they would have probably called first. Like if a good friend of mine calls me and says their car's broken down, I'm going to call his wife and say, did he call you? And say the same thing. Can you verify that this is the case before I send money or do whatever they're asking me to do?
Good to know if I'm ever broken down in Kentucky, and I don't want my wife to know I'm broken down in Kentucky.
Yeah. We have a cluster of questions to your right.
I'm Karen Witter, and since I'm her sister, I have a similar question but different about the nefarious nature. She's asking what can we as individuals do, but can you just speak to the whole aspect of the people who their whole purpose is nefarious use, from interference of political elections to all of those kinds of things, and what you think should be done, whether it be regulations or whatever, because there's clearly the desire on other people's part to use it for alternative purposes than good.
So policy development.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, and it just not just with the generative AI, if we see even on YouTube or other social media platform. So I think any information if we find on a social media platform, it's always a good idea to go to a source and verify it from there. For example, if someone tells me that, okay, this is the policy coming in, I ask them, where did you find it? They say WhatsApp or Facebook or Instagram, then I try to go to the US Department of States to verify, is it real? So I think as a community member, going back to the real source and verifying will help us with the whole, I'm sorry, I'm just blanked out.
No, I do think that there's like kind of an individual response, which is what Neetu and Josh have gotten into about how do you verify information. And I think that's the same as it's always been, right? That, when I was a kid, the National Enquirer was on every, grocery store. And if you read those front pages as you were waiting in line, you thought the world was an interesting place, right? But we kind of knew that was kind of in that compartment. And I think that barrier, that gap between what we know is real and what we know is fake is getting tighter and tighter. And so I think personal verification of information is always incredibly important. It's just more important now. But I do think there's a coming policy response to some of this. In other words, as Josh said, any technology that's leading edge is moving faster than public policy can keep up. That's just the way the systems work. Public policy is always as a response to something. And I think we're seeing more and more states and the federal government, contemplating policies that will, at least give law enforcement tools to combat deep fakes like this by clarifying what is illegal and being able to punish those that do that for nefarious intent. And of course there's bad actors, right? There's always bad actors everywhere. The internet was full of bad actors 20 years ago. We had bad actors before the internet. They're just giving more and more access to us. They're getting more and more access to us in a way that is faster and faster, and that makes it more and more difficult to stay ahead of. But I do think think it's going to come back to individual verification of trying to define what is the truth here, and not taking kind of that first response. So, it's going to be something we're dealing with. Yes, sir.
John, I have 2 questions back there.
Okay. All righty.
Mary Ann Gatton. If we think about AI as a child, and we survive, we get through the terrible twos. Then we encounter the teenage years. As teenagers, what's to prevent these different systems, are they singular or plural, from getting together in a group or a gang? How can we be assured?
We already have AI models that work together, and whenever they work together, it can work out in a very bad way because the biases are then compounded and nefarious actors can have their work compounded and do more harm. And it's the same way as children, it's the same way as people. We've been dealing with this for hundreds of years, that if you have enough bad people in a room, bad things are going to happen. And it's our goal and it's our mission as educators and innovators that we are focusing on putting as many good actors in the room as possible. We can't eliminate all of the bad ones, but we can generate some pretty good ones. And we can ensure that the good ones that we generate follow a certain set of rules and procedures and policies that we're hopefully developing in the very near future on the guidelines that we have to follow, and it will make it much easier for us to weed out these bad actors. And we have laws in society that say you shouldn't do certain things. If someone does something that they're not supposed to do, you lose trust in them. And that's what we need to do with these AI models, is just completely drop trust. I'm sure we've all had family members that are bad actors and we've had to just say, I'm cutting you off. You are no longer part of my life, whether it's a family member or friend. And we need to do the same thing with AI models. And it needs to happen on a personal and community level.
Thank you.
Good morning, Terry Knoll. I have a marketing consulting company and I publish 2 local magazines, so I'm big into stats and data. So a statement, I have a colleague that's been paid from one of the language models to feed questions and answers and do the thumbs up and so forth. So my one question is, are the models sharing this, is Watson sharing with, the chat GPTs? And then you already kind of alluded to it on trying to prevent videos that aren't really the real person and so forth, but how is the actual language model going, or are they going in and checking this stuff that people feed in, garbage in, garbage out? So who's overseeing that?
So I'll take the first part. These large language models, they're not going to share data because it's not in their best interest to help the other large language models, because it's all about money in the end. And if you're comparing Watson against ChatGPT, they're going to want to maintain an edge. And Google did the same thing with their search engine. That's why we don't ask Jeeves anything anymore, is because Google didn't share the information, because they didn't say, this is how we're gathering data. They just said, we're gathering data and we're doing it our way, you do it your way, and the best one will survive. And we're experiencing that same thing. It's essentially a gold rush right now with the large language models. And they're willing to do essentially whatever it takes to be the winner. And right now, it's whatever. It's kind of the Wild West. And once these policies and procedures get in place, then we'll kind of curtail these and make sure that only the good ones survive, is the overall plan.
To your front left.
And if I could address the second part of the question, that who is taking care of that. So there is a whole team who is working on these large language models, which includes the data science engineers, the data analytics, and the multidisciplinary teams, which comes from liberal arts, psychology, to interpret and make sure that it's a real thing, not a fake thing. So that's where they take out that bad data. Every time it's a continuous process to make the model more reliable.
Good morning, Molly Lamb, UIS.
Hi, Molly.
On the chart you have, where around AI and education, you had 4 prongs. One being adaptive learning platforms and assistive technology, which I don't know all of how you're defining those buckets, but I'm quite interested in understanding the intersectorality between AI and special education and using it in a way to enhance those learners at early ages around like literacy, for example.
Absolutely. So I have a 4-year-old, and I'm trying to teach her everything in the world. And I don't know everything, and it's going to break her heart if she watches this and hears me say that. But what I end up doing is going to these large language models and saying, I understand this, but I have what's called the curse of knowledge. I know something, but I don't know how. I can't put myself in the position of how did I learn this? I don't remember learning how to speak. It just happened. And I was there for it. I was present, but I wasn't really present. And so I'm asking these large language models simple things like, how do I define this to a 2-year-old? How can I approach this in a different way? Or here's what I want to talk to my daughter about. She's been asking about the birds and the bees, and that's not a topic I want to have. And so I've asked ChatGPT, how can I approach this at the level of a 4-year-old? And getting these approaches and these different perspectives really help. And then bringing it down to the special needs child, you can very easily say, like, this approach worked well for this type of child. I need a different approach for someone that has visual impairments or who's autistic. You can be very specific in what you're asking for, and it'll say, oh, based on the data and whatever else, try this different approach. And again, it's up to us to analyze that data and receive that response and analyze it ourselves and determine if it's something worth doing. But it's definitely there, and I use it in my classrooms. I'm a computer scientist, and I have discussion boards, and I ask my kids all the time, do you see any ethical implications as to what like our code or this code can do? And I use ChatGPT to say, are there any racial biases? Being a middle-aged white man, I've been privileged, and I haven't experienced certain biases and certain bridges. I haven't had to overcome certain things, and ChatGPT helps me detect that and say, well, someone from this demographic may have struggled in these other ways. So it ain't even just about the special needs. It's about just different approaches and bringing in those different personalities, things that I would normally have conversations with coworkers about, to say, hey, I know that you were raised differently, you came up from a different background. What struggles did you have? And how can I help you overcome those? And how can I help those future learners overcome those?
Very, very quickly, and quick responses. We are over time.
Oh, quick. John Kierkegaard, University of Illinois. The question is about the good, the bad, and the ugly. The ugly, the hallucinations are obvious. We can thumbs down those without issues. But on the good versus bad side, that we want to confirm the good, say no to the bad, but there's bias. We watch Fox News if we're more conservative. We watch MSNBC if we're more liberal. How do we decide what is good and bad when we as a group don't have the same opinions on a lot of topics?
And I think that's a very good question. If you see here, I was just looking into some research. It's always a good idea, if you are not sure, tell the model, I'm not sure whether it's good or bad, so that the model knows that too. So I think it's, again, as a human, we have to go and do our research and then make sure that can be replicated in the model.
And I'd like to add that we still need to treat this like a conversation. Just because you're having a conversation with this large language model doesn't mean that's the end-all be-all. We need to bring in data from as many sources as we possibly can, and that's what AI is trying to do, but we still need to do it with each other. Now, even though ChatGPT told me I should vote for this person because of this X, Y, and Z, I still need to have conversations with people that I trust and bring up those data points and say, is this something, are you detecting any bias with this? And having these personal connections, either with AI or with each other, will help us build that knowledge base. And we've been doing the same thing for our entire lives. We have these confirmation biases, and it's our goal as people to try and eliminate those in whatever way possible. And we just need to keep doing the same thing we've been doing.
Is it our goals, people?
Yeah, I was just going to say,
It should.
I don't think
It should be our goal. It should be our goal.
I thought the same.
I'm going to stop us there. This was wonderful. I think we could have taken more time this morning. How about a thank you for Rob, Neetu, and Joshua? Our next Friday morning program is May 24th. Joining us will be Scott Dahl, Director of the Springfield Convention and Visitors Bureau. Scott will moderate a program, Talking Tourism, with his leadership team at Visit Springfield. With that, I want to remind you of a program next Thursday night, May 2nd, free, 6 to 7, doors open at 5:30. A conversation with Governor Pritzker. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend.